Okay, so I'm going to start with a story, and some of you might be able to relate to this story. Basically, I was going to university at the University of Alberta back in 2007, and some of my friends pointed me to this amazing service called Pandora Radio. And what Pandora did is it let me say which music I liked, and it just played more music that it thought I would like, and it happened to do this really well. And as a student, this was amazing because I would sit there and I'd put tunes on while I was studying, and I didn't have to worry about keeping my playlist stocked or anything. It just would go without me having to think about it. And then one horrible day I went to go study, and I went to Pandora, and I saw this, which basically says, because you are not in the US, we are not going to do anything for you. And of course, Pandora didn't do this because they're horrible people. They did this because, unfortunately, the licensing for media, so whether that's movies, television, music, is independent in Canada and the US. So while they have legal right to do the streaming service in the US, they don't in Canada. And you can read a bit more about it, in this article here. If you search for this, which basically is just them saying what I said, which is that they can't stream in Canada anymore. So Pandora is my first case of running into this, and increasingly as more and more media has moved online, this has become more and more annoying. So with things like a lot of the US channels that stream content, they're only accessible in the US. Netflix gives you different content in the US and Canada, typically worse content in Canada than it does in the US. And again, this annoys me greatly. So I started looking around for solutions to this. And it turns out this actually isn't that hard to do. And there's a few different ways you can go about it. So given that most of the people here are developers, most of you probably have a server down in the US. And if you do, you can actually just set up what's called a SOX tunnel through it. And in OS X, this is very easy to do. I'm going to be doing this on OS X. There's equivalent ways to do this on Windows, and if you're curious about those, you can ask me about that afterwards. So basically what I'm going to go is I'm going to go down to my terminal. Okay. And I'm not sure if my screencast is going to capture this or not, but I'm going to go to my terminal, and I'm going to SSH with what's called a dynamic tunnel into one of my servers down in the States, which is my dream host. And I'm creating a tunnel on port 8080, argonauts.dreamhost.com. I use 8080 just because some internet connections, like free wireless connections, will block lots of ports, and 8080 is one that typically isn't, so I like to use that. So I'm going to SSH in, it's going to ask for my password. I'll give my password, so now I'm connected. Oh, if I give it the correct password. Oh, I need to give it the correct user as well. Now if I give it the correct password, that tunnel's in place. Now I can go into Firefox. If I go into my network preferences under advanced, I can go to settings, manual proxy, and here under SOX host I give 127, which basically, for anyone who's not familiar with this, basically is just my own address. It just says look at this own computer, and I give it a port, which is the port that I set up. So in this case it was 8080. I go OK, and I close this. And now if I go and I reload Pandora's website, I no longer see that very annoying page that says that I don't get to see anything. Instead, I actually get Pandora's app. So this is great, and this is amazing, and this also lets me do some amazing things, like if I want to log into my Netflix account, which is a Canadian Netflix account paid for with a Canadian credit card. I should mention you can actually pay for Pandora with a Canadian credit card, which is one thing I do. And I look for a movie like, for example, Tron. Now, Tron is not available under Canadian Netflix, but it shows up here, and if I go to play, it will actually go and run if we wait for it to load. Come on, Netflix. And sure enough, Tron is playing. Tron I use as my de facto test if my proxy stuff is working test. So sure enough, I can access Tron, and I get access to all the other great content that is only available in the United States. Now, this works great for things that I want in Firefox, but let's say that there's something, some other application that I want to use. So an example for this is Pandora actually has a desktop application. So say I want to get that desktop application to work. Well, fortunately I can use the same method. So of course, not available in this country. What I can do, and again, there's equivalent ways to do this on Windows. They're a little bit trickier than they're on Mac. On Mac, this is pretty easy. I go to my network settings and proxies, and you'll see Mac takes me right here. I just turn on my SOCKS proxies. Again, I set up 127.0.0.1 and 8080. I go OK, and then I go Apply. So now that's set up, and now I can start my Pandora app. And that will work.
They're all waiting for you.
Okay, so I just got a phone call, so sorry for the disruption, but I'm just going to continue off where I left. Okay, so again, now that I have the proxy set up for my computer, I can go and connect for this app even though it's not in a web browser, which means I can use Pandora, which I love. Now, there's a few other ways you can go about doing this if you happen to not have a server down in the States that you can just easily connect into. One is using VPN. So one I've used previously is HMA, and I had pretty good luck with them. One of the great things about them versus other offerings is that they have servers all over the world, and you can connect into any of those. Whereas some of the services you need to choose which servers you want when you sign up, and they limit you to 2 or 3 servers, and HMA lets you use all their servers whenever you want. So you can come out in the UK if you need to access British content, etc. Another way to do this is something that I've actually started using, which is this unblockus.com. And I don't know how this actually works. It doesn't appear to be using a VPN where all your content goes through the system. It seems to do some kind of DNS trickery. The way you set it up is by setting up your DNS. And the trick with them versus the other options is that they have to actively support a given product for you to be able to use it. But as you can see here, they support most of the things you'd want to use. And the nice thing about them is that because it doesn't seem like your traffic goes to them, you don't have the same bandwidth issues. So using a VPN or, like in my case, going through DreamHost, the fact is that all your traffic's bouncing through their server. So if the connection to their server isn't a broad pipe, or it gets busy or whatever, you can see some performance issues where your streams won't work quite as well. Whereas using this, I haven't seemed to have had any of those problems. What I actually use this for is on my Boxy box. And if you're interested in finding more about setting that up on a Boxy box, you can check out my blog. I've got an article setting that up here. Okay, so that's basically my talk. It looks like I went a little bit long, so I'll need to try and talk a little bit faster or talk about a little bit less when I do my presentation, but I hope that was useful.